Welcome to the Productivity Podcast. This one has been a long time in the making, but I'm delighted to be joined by Alex Rezvan, founder, host of the Retail Podcast and retailnews.ai. Hi, Alex. How you doing?
Hey, Simon. Lovely to speak after all this time.
Yeah, it's been a while in the making. This one, as we're both busy people, but we're here, we're recording, and I really appreciate you taking the time out to come on.
Thank you for inviting me, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Good. So we're going to talk kind of emerging trends that you're seeing in all the various shows and conferences that you attend across the world, which I think is going to be really interesting for our listeners.
Sure.
But before then, do you want to give us a bit of career background, Alex, around who you are, what you do, talk a bit about the podcast, retailnews.ai as well?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So corporate by nature, in the sense that my first sort of part of my life was at an American company called Verizon. I ended up last role, I was the president for consultancy for the retail sector, and some of the claims to fame was, for example, building Amazon Go for Tesco's in 2013, which Mike Mack at the time, who was the CIO, then moved to Target and took Verizon with him and the team at Verizon. So, big in-depth view on grocery. Then I was at Microsoft a little bit in consulting. Then I ended up being the lead for retail in the UK. And about, like, I'm sure a lot of your guests, during COVID, you have that sort of, where am I going? What is this all about? Yeah. And I decided to start the podcast while I was at Microsoft. And then it just grew and grew and grew. And now I have the great fortune of traveling the world. Literally came back from Singapore a couple of weeks back, Shanghai before that, and attend the world's largest retail conferences and bring those insights to my listeners, the clients that I may be working with. And then the retailnews.ai element, obviously some stuff goes into the podcast. The retailnews.ai is a news platform where I try not to gatekeep everything. So any of the insights, intelligence, anything that comes up, I'll pop it on there, and that sort of lives and breathes as a news portal for folks that are interested in what's happening in retail.
Amazing. And we'll put links to both of those in the show notes so people can find them easily. So traveling to the big retail conferences, I mean, for those that don't travel that listen, traveling always sounds sexy and exciting. You're going to tell me the reality is you get on a plane, you go to a hotel, you see the show, you go back to the hotel, get on a plane and come home, aren't you?
Yeah, my favorite one is whenever there's an event in Las Vegas, I'm like, oh my God, you're going to Las Vegas. And I actually don't like Las Vegas. So for anyone who's been, the fact that when you go through the airport, they've got slot machines.
Yep.
It tells you the view. But yeah, I land, go to the hotel wherever the event is, live in my room for 3 days and come back. But the thing that I do love, I'm a forever learner, and I love learning. And it was one thing actually, a quote that they used to sort of band about at Microsoft, not to be a know-it-all, but a learn-it-all. And that really stuck with me in terms of, learning and trying to pass on those learnings. So, but you're absolutely right. Hotel room all the way.
Yeah. So it sounds glamorous and sexy. Believe me, it's not. and yeah, having been to Vegas, if you're not particularly a gambling sort, which I'm not, it's a spectacle clearly, but you probably miss more than 70% of the attraction if you're not a keen gambler.
Yeah, no, I hate losing money.
Yeah.
And so early on in my life, I realized I am probably a really bad poker player and an even worse gambler. So I just hate losing money, which keeps me away from any of the gambling stuff that goes on there.
Join the club. I could tell you some stories about some of the stuff we saw in Vegas in the some of the casinos, but that's probably a different podcast, so we'll stay clear of that. So retail shows then, for those that maybe aren't familiar with the ones that exist, we've got, I think probably the biggest one in the UK is the Retail Technology Show, which is Olympia going to Excel next year, normally in April, May. There's NRF, which is the National Retail Federation one, which is the big one in New York in January, which lots of people go across for. There's then things like Shop Talk, Eurosys. Where else in the world do these events take place and what do they consist of? And then we can talk about kind of what's hot.
Sure. Okay. I think it's important to sort of stress and this is the sort of this year was actually the first year of going to all of them, because I was in a position to be able to do that. So there are conferences and there are expos.
Mm-hmm.
Conferences, as you would expect, there are more speakers and less expo. I think NRF is unique in the sense because it's been going on for so long. I mean, I've been going for about, I don't know, 13 years, 14 years, and it's probably about 20-year-old conference. But that's the biggest one. So, for example, some expos have stages to the left, to the right, and they'll put some sponsored content there, maybe get some customers come along. I don't like those. And probably two of the events that I went to this year, I won't go back to next year. And obviously the one in the UK. So let me, the calendar starts with NRF. Then you do have Eurosys or Euroshop. Euroshop is 10 times better than Eurosys. Eurosys is more of a German. It's an expo for European technology providers.
And they're not every year, are they? They every 2 years, 3 years. There's some strange pattern to
Euroshop,
those.
I think, is every 3 years. Yep. And then Eurosys is the filler in between Euroshop in Dusseldorf.
Yep.
And then we've got, obviously, Shop Talk in Las Vegas, which I absolutely love. I think it's a great format. It's changed hands, so it's owned by Hive now. I don't know how, because they invest. So the food is good, the talks are good, food is a really important thing if you go to all of these things. And so some of the places, the food is horrendous. Eurosys being one of them. But anyway, Shop Talk in Las Vegas. Then you've got sort of the UK Retail Week, World Retail Congress, which has now had a management buyout, which traditionally happens in March or April. And then you've got the Retail Week Awards as well. And that it tries to be a more conference, less expo. And I think a lot of the time, having been a sponsor and talking to sponsors of the event, they're like, oh man, this it's a different but good quality crowd. So, and then you've got the Retail Technology Show, but that tends to be in, I think, April, right? April time. So World Retail Congress. And then you end up with the European Shop Talk in June. This year, NRF decided to do NRF APAC, which I was at, which I loved, in Singapore. I went to Shanghai as well to do a safari. So in these regions, like in London or Shanghai or Singapore or New York, I'll do a retail safari. And the thing to sort of call out there, a lot of times you'll see on LinkedIn say, come with me as I go on a safari. And it's like someone going shopping, right, with their wife or someone, some anecdotal thing that they've just now said. For me, I'm really specific about safaris. Safaris have to be either new tech, new processes, new UX, UI, something new that is, is not like you can find in any high street around the world. And that really frustrates me because it sort of degrades or devalues the word safari. And so safaris are supposed to be these unique experiences, not one that you can just walk to or walk into in any corner of the world by going into a flagship Nike. Nike is my pet gripe because I was like, oh, come with me to this. And it's like, okay, all right. And then you've got Paris Retail Week in September. Grocery Shop in October. They've now, because of the success, there is a women's only event for Shop Talk. There's also Shop Talk Full in October. There are a whole bunch of UK ones, but I'm not predominantly. I think there's enough people covering the UK, so I don't cover the UK. I go everywhere else but the UK. The only two I do is the Retail Week and World Retail Congress, which I think is returning back to the UK next year. You got the Web Summit in November in Portugal, which is a tech summit, but I always used to watch it online. I'll be there in person. And then the odd one, I don't know if you know, maybe you know this one, Simon. I only learned about this last year. It's called MAPIC. It happens in Cannes. And it's basically all of the retailers that have massive estates across the world, your McDonald's or these big estates or shopping malls or whatever. This is a conference for those property managers. But now the reason I'm going is they've introduced technology. And so I'd be curious to see everyone in physical retail or property owners want to know what's working, what's not, to make the invisible visible. And so that's something that's been my first time happening in November. And then we'll do it all again next year with NRF, as you mentioned, in January.
So a full calendar, nicely spread out. Hopefully you can tag a bit of holiday on some of those as well to make sure it's not all.
I've got young
related.
kids. That's the argument I have with my wife, because I'm like, let's go, and she's like, you do remember there is a fine if you take the kids out of school? And I was like, oh yeah.
Well,
okay.
A chance to have some time away and reflect. Then
don't tell her that, but yes.
No, exactly. So I suppose reflecting on what you've seen this year, clearly from a retailer's point of view, shrink tends to be and loss tends to be the number one topic of discussion at the moment, closely followed by cost outside of shrink. So whether that be labour, rate, rent, property, transport costs. What things have you seen that are kind of starting to emerge that are you class as hot from those events, or consistent themes across the ones you've been to?
I think if I start the year NRF 2024 in New York, the explosion of AI, anything AI, right? AI optimization in your supply chain, AI optimization in personalization. AI was the thing that sort of was the explosive headline to try and, almost clickbaity in the sense of getting people to come along. And then people would go along, and especially people like myself who come from a tech background, I'm like, this is just like machine learning hashed underneath the umbrella of AI. Or it's people were really grasping at straws of trying to create AI use cases that were genuinely, and in my layman's definition of AI is like, multiple data sets being able to come together to create unique outcomes that then can create uniquer outcomes or intelligence for you. I'm pretty sure someone's probably screaming at their microphone or headset going, no, that's not AI. That's AI for me, right? Having worked in the data field. And the other thing that, they kept taking for granted at all these events, retailers have different levels of maturity when it comes to their approach with data within their infrastructure. So if they're lucky, some of the big grocers, they have CRM systems, they have ERP systems, they have a plethora of product, homegrown systems, each with its own little data set, right? Each that then can, if it's been cleansed, then it's sitting in some sort of cloud server with someone, can be put into some sort of AI or machine learning process to get outcomes. Most people don't have that. Most retailers are not, they don't have 2,000 developers working for them to be able to drive those outcomes. So they're really heavily reliant on the software providers to create outcomes for them. So anyway, beginning of the year, 100% attached to what you were saying about loss, shrink, theft, and all of the solutions to try and tackle that. And then as the year sort of progressed, people realized that the use cases for AI, how are we doing for time, didn't exist. And so therefore they sort of shifted the dial in the event space and went back to, getting for example, the chairman of IKEA to talk about what IKEA is doing. And a lot of the use cases that sort of the big chief execs, the chairman, for example, or the CEO of Carrefour, they started then to talk about accessibility, about inclusion, not the D&I bracket, but more of the ESG, corporate social responsibility, and trying to look at how what role technology plays in that. And then what became apparent is through all of this, and again, people will be shouting at this microphone or thing, whether you call it omni-channel, multi-channel, whatever, all of the channels that exist in retail. Again, let's not worry about what you call it. The one thing that social commerce is driving, or digital is driving, is the fact that retailers now are going from, in the past where there were 6 digital touch points before someone converted on your website or in your store, it's now 12 or 16. Cost of living crisis sort of pushed that forward. And so then conversion becomes how do I get my customers to convert? How do I get to know my customers? And then what are the experiences? And so in the middle of the year, there was that sort of focus on how AI is helping by gathering intelligence as cookies sort of float away, how they do that. Again, technologies that you mentioned from an operational perspective, I think they were more of the trusted, for example, process flow through your environment, gate management,
Yeah.
all the getting decent. I think the pendulum has swung the other way for some retailers, where now everything is behind your shelf, everything is tagged, and
Yep.
some of these tags are really horrendous in terms of the way that the process of getting the tag on and off. But again, for example, in Shop Talk, when I counted the number of sustainability and shrink talks I think there were like one or two or three. So it's really interesting because people sort of don't understand that world in itself, there's a load of innovation that's happening there. There's a load of process change that's happening there, and that you can improve and mitigate risk. But I think, the conferences haven't got to that. And then as I sort of went to Asia and I saw what was happening in Shanghai, it really hit me that the way that we think about the whole path to purchase and shopping missions and even customers has to change and mature. I'm not going to talk about it here because that's another 15, 20-minute conversation. But it's just, it's something that I genuinely felt like, oh my God, I'm going back to the dark ages when I go back to the West. And I wasn't expecting that because I take pride in what we've done in the UK, in Europe, in the US. I think we've led. But now having been there, experienced what that is, been to over 30 stores, spoken to X amount of store managers, I'm like, okay, I get it. We are a little bit behind the curve, and that's probably the next sort of set of trends that will come down the line. And I'm excited. We've got the summer break now. I'm excited to see where, grocery shop will go in October. We've got Paris Retail Week in September. So I'm curious to see how we will finish the year. But that's the year so far.
Excellent. No, brilliant summary. And it's interesting that, I saw we didn't do NRF this year. We did it last year. Maybe we do it next January. But I think that was, for me, the start of that trend of the whole AI. I'd call it a rebadging of technology that was already there, if it was
Absolutely.
an algorithm.
Yes.
And it felt, and I'll do it again, a disservice probably to some people listening, it still feels like more of a marketing spin than a reality. We've got AI generated schedules and all those kind of things in the productivity world, but that was there before the word AI existed.
Absolutely.
It was algorithm generated or sequenced. So I'm hopeful, and I think it's some solutions that are searching for problems at the moment, rather than starting with what's the problem, how do we solve it. It's almost, we've done some neat stuff, where can we retrofit the problem to, which is always tricky in selling tech if you're trying to retrofit the problem because you've developed a nice idea that people maybe don't see the value in. But I think that'll speed up in the next couple of years as again, just from a purely selfish point of view in the UK, the government will take us to a £15 minimum wage. That will force people to think differently. That will involve tech doing some stuff. We're already seeing some great stuff with things like date checking, electronic shelf edge labels, age verification via headsets and cameras. So we're on the cusp. How quickly that speeds up, and maybe the East have got it nailed or almost bypassed that step, will probably yet to be seen.
Well, the cost of labor, I mean, look, as I said, there's these themes that I understand the cost of labor. We can talk about there's these elements that has a different impact over there, the manufacturers of the world, but they do approach the customer in a different way. And as you were talking, there were two things that I didn't mention, which was robotics and augmentation of robotics in store, reducing labor hours by having out of stock and all the other shelf edge type activities being outsourced to robots. The other thing that sort of really made sense to me when I heard this, that will continue, is that AI is a feature, not a product. So we will go faster with features in all of our workloads during the day, thanks to AI. but they're not necessarily going to be AI products. They're just features that help us as, workers within the retail environment be able to do more faster. And hence why, there will be an impact somewhere. And you're absolutely right to call out the increase in minimum wage. I think, it'll have multiple impacts. But yeah.
I think we all kind of know where it's going. We're not quite sure, I think, how we get there and what it looks like when we're there. But I think we can all see the direction, can't we? Which makes it interesting. And I'd be interested, if we had this conversation in 12, 18 months, 24 months time, how some of the things you're seeing have changed, how some have remained the same, or actually how we may end up even in another marketing world of rebadging it to AI 2.0 or whatever the next iteration is.
Yeah, I think the one thing I say to a lot of retailers, especially in Europe, that the customers that I work with, is the fact that there's this sort of, I don't know, this disruption. They don't believe. It's not what they don't believe it. Maybe they just are. It's a tanker, and turning that tank around, or the plane changing. Building the plane while you are flying it is incredibly difficult. But what AI will do for everyone, or automation will do for everyone outside of your market, they'll be able to come into your market, beat you at your own game, far cheaper than you're able to do it, with pretty much the same product. It then comes down to marketing, and that's what luxury has been fantastic at over the years, and managed to sort of keep reinventing themselves to stay relevant, to keep those prices up. And so therefore it's very hard for a luxury retailer to be displaced. Not that it can't happen, but it's just a little bit tougher. But for everyone else, I think they're going to get caught short. And it's not, this isn't empty, like, oh my God, the sky is falling down. It's just basic economics, operational economics. If I can do and get the same outcomes at 20 to 30 to 40% cheaper than you, thanks to the use of technology, I can then disrupt you in your own market, which is what Aldi and Lidl did, right? In grocery.
Yep,
and everyone was like, oh no, that's never going to happen.
Interesting times. Well, we'll pause on that note. If people want to reach out to you or find the podcast or retailnews.air, which will help them with, by, as I say, putting it in the show notes, where's the best place for them to get in touch?
Really simple. Retailnews.ai is the platform where all the content lives. TheRetailPodcast.com. I'm not as hot on the retail podcast, just from a timing perspective, but that's where that lives. And then I live on LinkedIn, so you can always catch me, Alex Rezvan, on LinkedIn, and I should sort of pop up.
Brilliant. Well, I say it's been a while in the making. We got there. Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it, and we'll catch up soon.
Perfect. Thank you, Simon, for having me. Real great pleasure.